Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the person you trusted most had been living a lie. A single message shattered 11 years of marriage, sending Daniel down a path he never expected. One that would lead to a hotel room, a confrontation, and a truth so devastating it would change everything. But betrayal is just the beginning. What happens next? Stay with me because this story is about more than just heartbreak. It's about revenge, redemption, and the strength to start over. Daniel Harris stood in the doorway of their bedroom, silently watching as his wife, Lillian Brooks, packed her suitcase with the kind of meticulous care she reserved for important trips. At 36, he had grown accustomed to her routines, the precise way she folded her clothes, the way she categorized items based on priority. Yet today, something felt different. The air in the room carried an unfamiliar weight, an undercurrent of tension that he couldn't quite define. Lillian moved efficiently, her auburn hair catching the dim morning light that filtered through the curtains. Her green eyes sparkled with anticipation as she carefully tucked a silk blouse into her bag. Daniel noted the effort she had put into her appearance. Her makeup was carefully applied, her lips tinted with a shade of red she typically saved for special occasions. She had styled her hair in soft waves, rather than the usual ponytail she wore to work. Even her perfume, a familiar blend of jasmine and vanilla, lingered stronger than usual in the air. She was preparing for a 5-day trip to a professional conference in Denver, or so she had told him. The educational summit was an annual event, one she had attended before, but something about this particular trip unsettled Daniel. He tried to dismiss the unease creeping into his thoughts. After all, they had been married for 11 years. Trust was the foundation of their relationship. His gaze drifted to the suitcase, where he noticed something unexpected. A delicate set of lace lingerie, one he had gifted her just last month for their anniversary. A warmth had filled his chest when she first received it, her expression one of genuine appreciation. Now, seeing it nestled among her professional attire, an inexplicable doubt took root. His voice remained steady when he finally spoke. "Did you double-check your itinerary? Just to make sure you have everything?" She looked up briefly, offering a small smile. "Yes, I have everything I need." Daniel nodded, pushing away his nagging thoughts. He had no reason to question her. She had always been devoted to her career, to their life together. He told himself that he was simply overanalyzing things, reading too much into insignificant details. Still, he couldn't ignore how much effort she had put into her appearance this morning. She rarely spent this much time getting ready, especially for work-related events. His mind replayed the little changes he had noticed over the past few months. Later nights at the office, unexplained weekend meetings, the sudden interest in new clothes, her phone always angled away when she texted. It was nothing. He was imagining things. Lillian zipped up her suitcase and set it by the door. "I'll call you every night," she promised as she leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to his lips. "I'll miss you. I'll miss you too." He forced a smile, trying to shake the uneasy feeling settling in his chest. "Bring me back a souvenir." She chuckled lightly. "Of course." Daniel walked her to the door, watching as she wheeled her suitcase to the car. He stood at the window, waving as she drove off, disappearing around the corner. The house, once filled with movement and sound, now felt eerily empty. He sighed and headed toward the kitchen, deciding that a strong cup of coffee might help him shake off his unease. He had grading to do, exams to check. Distraction would be good. Just as he settled at the dining table, his phone buzzed. Expecting it to be Lillian confirming her arrival at the airport, he glanced at the screen. Instead, an unknown number flashed across the display. Frowning, he unlocked his phone and read the message. "Your wife isn't who you think she is. Check the guest list for the Belmont Hotel." Daniel read the words again, his pulse quickening. A wave of coldness swept over him, despite the warm spring air filtering through the windows. At first, he wanted to dismiss it as a joke, a scam, something not worth his attention. But the seed of doubt had already been planted. His mind spun, trying to rationalize. Who would send such a thing? And why? He set his phone down, determined to focus on his work. But as he attempted to read through the exam papers before him, the words blurred together. He kept rereading the same lines, unable to absorb any of it. Frustrated, he exhaled sharply and reached for his laptop. Just a quick search, he reasoned. If nothing came up, he could move on with his day. He navigated to the Belmont Hotel's website, scrolling through their conference facilities. There, he found an option to check event registrations. His fingers hovered over the keyboard before he finally typed in the details. Conference name, National Educators Summit. Attendee, Lillian Brooks. He hit submit and waited. His heart pounded against his ribs as the results loaded. No attendees found matching your search. He stared at the screen, blinking in disbelief. That had to be a mistake. He tried again, double-checking the spelling, making sure he had entered everything correctly. Still nothing. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach as he pulled up their shared digital calendar. The event was clearly marked, 5 days at the conference. But beneath that entry, something else caught his eye, something he didn't recognize. A separate notation, JT Weekend Getaway. Daniel's breath caught. His hands trembled as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. The initials nagged at the back of his mind until it suddenly clicked. Jason Turner, the new physical education instructor she had been working with on a school-wide wellness initiative. It was nothing. It had to be nothing. But the unease had fully taken hold now, its grip tightening around his chest. Almost without realizing it, he found himself walking toward Lillian's home office. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe an itinerary, some confirmation that she was exactly where she said she would be. He rifled through the papers on her desk, scanning over lesson plans and administrative notes. Nothing seemed out of place. He opened the drawers, finding much of the same: student projects, meeting schedules, miscellaneous stationery. Just as he was about to give up, his eyes landed on a thick notebook on the shelf, a slip of paper sticking out slightly from its pages. Heart pounding, he pulled the notebook down and unfolded the paper. The words on the page sent a chill down his spine. Can't wait for our weekend together. You're my muse, my inspiration. Jason's signature was scribbled beneath it. Daniel sank into the desk chair, gripping the note in his trembling hands. His world, the one he had trusted, built, and believed in, had just shattered. And he wasn't sure what to do next. Daniel sat motionless, the note trembling in his grasp. The weight of its meaning pressed against his chest, a force so heavy it stole the air from his lungs. Every rational thought told him to dismiss it, to convince himself it was a misunderstanding. But the evidence was clear, and it gnawed at the edges of his sanity. For 11 years, he had trusted in his marriage, believed in the foundation he and Lillian had built. Yet, with a single piece of paper, that trust now felt fragile, ready to collapse. He ran a hand through his hair, mind racing through memories, searching for signs he had missed. The unexplained late nights, the increased attention to her appearance, the hushed phone conversations. They had all seemed like harmless details before. Now they painted a different picture. Needing answers, he unlocked his phone and began searching. The Belmont Hotel's website offered little, but he found the front desk number and dialed. When the receptionist confirmed there was no conference reservation under Lillian's name, but did find a booking under Brooks for a double occupancy suite, the breath left his body. He did not need the second name to be spoken aloud. He already knew. He placed his phone down, staring blankly ahead. The pieces fit together too perfectly. His hands trembled as he tried to think logically, to figure out his next step. The confrontation could wait. What he needed now was certainty, something irrefutable. Scrolling through his contacts, he stopped on a familiar name. Sophie Caldwell had been a trusted friend for years, someone with a sharp mind and an ability to uncover the truth. He sent her a short message. A reply came almost immediately, and within the hour, she arrived at his door, her expression serious. He recounted everything: the text message, the failed search, the hotel confirmation. She listened without interruption, absorbing the details with careful consideration. Without hesitation, she opened her laptop, her fingers moving rapidly over the keys. She knew how to access information that most people wouldn't even think to look for. Minutes passed before a map loaded on the screen, a blinking dot revealing Lillian's exact location. It was nowhere near the conference venue. It sat right in the heart of the Belmont Hotel. Daniel felt a hollow ache settle deep within him. There was no room left for doubt. Sophie placed a reassuring hand on his arm, offering silent support. He barely acknowledged it, his mind already made up. He could no longer sit back and speculate. The time for uncertainty had passed. He rose from his seat, his movements deliberate. He gathered a bag, his mind focused on only one course of action. The truth had been laid before him. Now he had to face it. Without another word, he prepared for the journey ahead. The road stretched endlessly before Daniel, the hum of the tires against the asphalt filling the silence inside the car. The weight of the past few hours sat heavily on his chest, an ache that deepened with every mile closer to Denver. He had driven these roads before, but never under circumstances like these. The truth had been laid bare, and now he was on his way to confront it. Beside him, Sophie remained quiet, her presence a steady anchor in the storm of his thoughts. She had always been the practical one, methodical in her approach to any problem. Now, she scrolled through her phone, gathering what little information she could about the hotel, its layout, and any relevant details they might need once they arrived. Daniel barely acknowledged it. His mind was elsewhere, sifting through every memory of his marriage, every moment he had taken for granted, now cast in the harsh light of betrayal. The sun had begun its descent by the time they pulled into the city. The Belmont Hotel loomed ahead, its grand entrance welcoming visitors with an air of luxury. It was the kind of place meant for romantic getaways, not professional conferences. The confirmation of that reality pressed against his ribs, tightening like a vice. He parked the car a short distance away, taking a deep breath as he gripped the steering wheel. A part of him wanted to turn around to avoid whatever scene awaited inside, but another part, the part that had been restless since the moment he read that text message, pushed him forward. Sophie stepped out first, her movements swift and efficient. She had always been fearless in ways he wasn't. Without a word, he followed her lead, stepping into the warm glow of the hotel's lobby. The air inside smelled of expensive perfume and polished wood, the soft murmur of conversation and distant music filling the space. He forced himself to stay composed, his pulse hammering in his ears. The concierge greeted them politely, but Daniel barely registered it. His attention was fixed on the hallway leading toward the elevators, his thoughts racing ahead to what he might find. Sophie, ever perceptive, took charge, making a quiet inquiry at the front desk, her voice calm and assured. Within moments, she had secured the information they needed. Room 814. His feet carried him forward before he could second-guess himself. Sophie followed at a measured pace, keeping an eye on their surroundings. The elevator ride was brief but suffocating, the walls closing in around him as they ascended to the 8th floor. The doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a long corridor lined with identical doors. And at the end of it, his destination. He stopped in front of the room, his breath steady but shallow. For a moment, he considered knocking, giving them the chance to explain, to scramble for excuses. But another thought overpowered it. Why should he grant them that luxury? His fingers curled around the handle. He hesitated only a second before pushing the door open. The door swung open, revealing a dimly lit hotel room. The scent of expensive cologne and faint traces of perfume clung to the air, an undeniable mixture that struck Daniel like a physical blow. The bed was unmade, evidence of careless intimacy, the sheets tangled and creased. His gaze locked onto the two figures in the room. Lillian, startled, standing near the window, her expression frozen in a mask of shock, and Jason, sitting on the edge of the bed, caught mid-motion as he hastily reached for his shirt. A suffocating silence filled the room, heavier than any words could be. Lillian's mouth opened as if to speak, but no sound came. Jason avoided looking at Daniel, his entire posture tense, as though he were preparing to defend himself or flee. Daniel remained in the doorway, his pulse steady but his body rigid. There was no anger in his expression, no outburst of rage, only the hollow, suffocating weight of confirmation. He had imagined this confrontation in so many ways, but now that it was happening, there was no catharsis, only emptiness. Lillian finally found her voice, weak and trembling. "Daniel!" He lifted a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. There was nothing she could say that would change what was before him. Nothing that would erase the betrayal woven into the very fabric of the scene. Jason shifted uncomfortably, his presence an unwelcome stain. He exhaled, as if preparing to say something, but Daniel's gaze flickered toward him with quiet authority, and the words died in his throat. He wasn't owed an explanation. Nothing Jason could offer would justify what had already been done. Sophie lingered behind Daniel, her presence a steady force, a silent witness to the unraveling of what had once been a marriage. She had warned him that this moment would bring no solace, only the bitter taste of reality. The silence stretched until Daniel finally spoke, his voice devoid of emotion. "How long?" Lillian flinched, as if the simplicity of the question cut deeper than any accusation. She hesitated too long, and that alone was answer enough. His gaze swept the room once more, taking in every detail, sealing the moment in his memory. There was no need for more words, no need to hear apologies that would ring hollow. Without another glance at either of them, he turned and walked away, leaving the door ajar behind him. Sophie followed without question, matching his pace as they strode through the hallway, down the elevator, out into the cool night air. Daniel inhaled deeply, filling his lungs with something untainted, something real. He did not look back. By the time they reached the car, the weight in his chest had settled into something firm, something resolute. There would be pain, there would be questions, but one thing was clear: he was done. He would not let this define him. As Sophie started the engine, Daniel glanced at her, nodding once. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to take the first step forward. The drive back was long and silent, the weight of the confrontation lingering between them. Daniel stared out at the empty highway, watching the lights stretch endlessly into the darkness. The tension in his chest had not lessened, but it had transformed into something sharper, more defined. The pain of betrayal no longer overwhelmed him. It had settled into a quiet determination. Sophie kept her hands steady on the wheel, her presence a silent reassurance. She did not press him for words, did not try to fill the space with meaningless comfort. She knew, perhaps better than anyone, that this moment belonged to him, that he needed to sit with his thoughts before he could shape them into something he could voice. The town was still as they arrived, its streets empty in the early hours of the morning. Daniel's house, once a place of warmth and familiarity, now felt foreign. As he stepped inside, the quiet was deafening. The absence of Lillian's presence was tangible, yet not unwelcome. It was a space he would have to reclaim for himself. Sitting at the kitchen table, he allowed himself a rare moment of stillness. The memories pressed in on him, but this time, they did not suffocate. He knew what came next. There would be a divorce, inevitable and final. There would be whispers, pitying glances from neighbors and colleagues who would hear the story, whether he wanted them to or not. There would be loneliness, but there would also be freedom. Over the next few days, he moved through the motions, consulting a lawyer, collecting the necessary documents, preparing to untangle the life he had built with Lillian. She reached out once, but he let the call go unanswered. There was nothing left to say. News of the affair spread quickly, as small-town gossip always did. Jason, too, faced the consequences, his reputation shattered. Lillian had vanished from public view, avoiding the fallout. But Daniel had no intention of hiding. He continued to work, to exist, to push forward, one step at a time. A month passed and the papers arrived. The finality of it was stark, a single signature separating him from the past. He signed without hesitation. On the day the divorce was finalized, Sophie met him at the cafe where they had often spent time years ago, before life had twisted in unexpected ways. She raised an eyebrow as he slid into the seat across from her, a quiet question in her gaze. He met her eyes, and for the first time in weeks, He allowed himself a small, tired smile. "It's done," he said simply. She nodded, as if she had always known he would come through this. "And now," he exhaled, considering the road ahead. There was no clear destination, no fixed plan. But for the first time in a long while, he was okay with that. "Now," he said, "I start over."